Hello everyone and welcome. Today I'm excited to walk you through how to use the SoftComply Validation for Confluence Cloud app to automate cloud software validation. This is especially vital for the regulated industries such as the medical device industry. But let's start with some context. In the medical device regulations, validation means confirming through objective evidence that software tool consistently meets its intended use, essentially verifying that it does what it is supposed to do. International standards like ISO 13485 mandate validation of software used for quality management, including initial validation as well as revalidation after changes, proportionate to the risk. In other words, you will need to assess the main functions of your software tools and evaluate whether failure of a software function may compromise your device quality. If yes, you will need to include them in your validation testing. Basically, you need to assess if a software function is used as part of production or quality system. If yes, you will need to assess if the software is directly used in production or quality system or merely supports them. Next, you will need to assess whether the failure of the software function that is used in production or quality system of the device could lead to a safety risk of the medical device itself. If yes, it is certainly a high process risk and you will need a particular level of scrutiny during validation and revalidation. If you don't validate your software tools, you could face serious non-conformities. FDA issued numerous warning letters in the past few years specifically on software tool validation issues. But the real challenge comes when we talk about cloud software tools. With the frequent updates of these cloud software tools, how can you keep your validation up to date? On one hand, cloud software tools like Confluence Cloud have amazing benefits, security, scalability, low maintenance, but it also means daily incremental updates that you cannot opt out of. In these cases, manual validation, which takes weeks, is impractical if not impossible because of the updates that occur that often. And this is where automated validation shines. SoftComply's Validation for Confluence app runs periodic integrity checks that produce validation reports, including evidence like screenshots, so you always have documented proof of compliance. Best of all, it supports regulatory frameworks like 13485, FDA 21, CFR 11. And it's important to note that the SoftComply Validation app does not affect your data integrity as it is run on a dedicated environment. SoftComply tests Confluence as a black box, meaning that the validation app actually presses buttons and enters data. The app itself is designed to detect changes in Confluence, including ones in the UI, and tests are run on all key features of Confluence, including user management, space and page management, and restrictions and permissions. When a test fails, we troubleshoot any failure that occurs, and if it is a real Confluence bug, we notify the user and open a ticket with Atlassian. In case Atlassian changes the UI, which happens quite a lot, we update the test cases and run the tests again. All right, let's jump into the app and see how to run the app and how to interpret its outputs. Once you have installed the validation app for Confluence Cloud, you will find the app under the Apps menu in Confluence, and you will be taken to the App Global page where you can see when was the last test run, how frequently they are run, how successful they have been based on if any of the tests of the 40 tests have failed or been skipped. After each of the test runs, you can access the validation documentation that consists of 4 documents. We have the master validation plan that describes the scope and process of the validation of Confluence Cloud. Here we talk about the intended use of Confluence Cloud and the risk assessment of Confluence Cloud based on which we determine which features and functions of Confluence we are going to test in the validation test run. Validation protocol is the test protocol that describes each one of the test case, which we have 14 total, in the details of expected results and the different steps and sub-steps that we want to take in order to test each of the functions. Validation results is a detailed test result description for each executed test with documented evidence like screenshots and whether the tests have passed or failed. And finally, validation report that describes how the planned activities described in the validation plan were reached during the validation. But let's now jump into the master validation plan itself to see how the risk assessment takes place that determines which tests we are running. The master validation plan describes the Confluence features that we validate in the SoftComply Validation app for Confluence Cloud. It describes the intended use of Confluence in terms of where medical device developers would use Confluence, if Confluence is considered to be used directly as part of production or quality system, and whether the main functionality of Confluence is considered a high process risk or not. And if the failure of that function or feature could potentially also compromise the safety of the medical device that is being developed. Based on this risk assessment of all the features that we have described here, we have derived the 40 test cases that are included in each one of the Confluence validation run. Let's also look into the validation results document that we generate after each validation test run each week that goes through all the test cases of the test protocol. So each one of the 40 test cases have been provided here with a description of the test case itself, the steps for testing. So each test case has several steps or sub-steps that are taken to test that particular test case. The expected result of the test is described here, and the actual test is described together with the screenshots for objective evidence of how this test has been performed and if the test has passed or failed. And this same kind of logic applies to all the 40 different test cases where we test the user management, the space, the page management, permissions, and backup and restore. And this is all. This is how we validate Confluence. So if you want to keep your quality management system documents inside Confluence Cloud, then this is entirely possible because Confluence is validated when you use the SoftComply Validation app for Confluence Cloud. If you want to learn more about the validation of Confluence, please let us know and we'll be happy to show you the app in detail over a demo call. Thank you so much for watching and bye-bye.